Hello, welcome back to the Tea with Krystal, and I am on part 3 of my unpacking my testimony of God moving my family from Florida to Georgia within 52 days with no money. He did it all. No money, no savings. We didn't know where we were going. It was just supernatural. And so I'm outside of that season. I no longer live in Georgia right now, but I am unpacking that time, the before, during, and after the process of us moving from Florida to Georgia, how God worked it out, things that he did, people he sent, what he was teaching me during that time. So this is part 3, and I'm talking about very briefly, like, just being obedient and moving sight unseen, like not knowing what city first, not knowing where I was going, and the fact that it was to a different state. Second, not knowing what city, and third, not even knowing how the place was going to look like, where we were going to be living. And so this is after, like, being obedient first. And if you go back and watch part 2, part 1, there'll be multiple parts to this video, but it all started with obedience and just feeling in my environment or in within my spirit that something was about to happen. And I began to go before God and just, like, Lord, I know you're about to do something big. Prepare me for it. I don't want to sabotage it. I don't want to get in my own way. So God, you orchestrate my steps, order my steps. I just want to be obedient. And so leading up into the moment when I found out it was Georgia, my husband, because I didn't know, I just knew I was moving. I had started packing up my house. I just felt that's what I needed to start doing. Not only to, like, just lean on faith, like really move by faith, and just say, okay, I'm gonna start packing up my house. I don't know where I'm going. I don't have the income. Things don't look like we can move, but by faith, I'm going to do this. Because to me, that's an act, and that's showing God that you're trusting him to open up doors for you. You're not necessarily moving in your own strength and in your own will according to what your life looks like, but you're trusting God that he's going to open up the doors as you make moves. And so that's what I started to do, and just started packing up my house by faith. And then, starting to be led more by the Holy Spirit, I started to implement other things. I stopped talking to people, and this is just a short version of, like, just recapping on the last thing. Stop talking to people. God led me to people, and I even started going to therapy. That's how much I didn't want to mess it up. So, and it was not for me to put my trust in people or therapy, but I'm like, Lord, you know what I need, and I know my ways, so I don't want to mess this up. And so the moment that I found out that where we were going to be moving to was another state is one night, Thanksgiving, my husband and I, we were sitting outside very early in the morning. This was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were just having conversation. And this is something that we had tended to do quite often. After our kids go to bed, we would sit outside and just enjoy each other's company, and just have conversation for, it'd be hours, just whatever we're talking about. And we were just talking about life and things like that. And so my husband brought up the conversation about our previous our previous attempt of trying to move to Georgia. And he was just talking about how it's just something that he wanted to try again. He wanted to do again. He just feels like our family is supposed to be in Georgia. Now, I will recap our first attempt in another video, but 3 years, 2.5, almost 3 years prior to the actual move to Georgia, we attempted, like, we talked about it. My husband was already living there, but it just didn't work out. And honestly, it was me. Like, I was afraid. There was so much fear. Now that I think about it, it was like, a lot of it was me, but also it was God too, in his timing. Like, there was a lot of things that had to be done first before we made that move too. But And I definitely wasn't where I was spiritually during that time. I was a whole hot mess when my husband went to Georgia that time. Like, so it just, I don't know, but it wasn't the time. And maybe it was supposed to be then. And just because of where I was, just like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I I was just very immature. It wasn't ready for that. But here we are sitting on our porch Thanksgiving, and my husband brings it up again, just like, man, I would like to try again and things like that. And I immediately felt this like butterfly feeling in my stomach, and the Holy Spirit was like, that's it, that's the move you're making, like, you're going to Georgia. And I'm like, what? Georgia, Lord? Okay. So with that conversation with my husband didn't think much of it, but I said, okay. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's try again. I think it's good for us to try again. Yeah, because we had done some growing and things had happened during that time, like where I felt like, okay, yeah, I'm in a different place now, 3 years later, so we can do this again. And so that was the first reveal of like me moving in obedience, because I knew God was moving me somewhere or doing something, and I didn't know what, and then he immediately revealed it. So I just imagine if I wasn't doing the things in preparation before, like what would have happened, right? I would never know, but that was the moment. And I was like, okay, God. So then immediately the next day, I'm just like, okay, Lord, I know this is something that you want us to do this time around, so I'm gonna lean into it for sure, and I still need your help and your leading. And so now we hadn't been to Georgia in the past 3 years, never went back to visit, we never talked about moving, anything like that. And so I began to pray, and I'm like, okay, Lord, I need, what do I do? How do I go about this? You're going to have to open up the doors. Like, I literally kept God in the front. Like, God, I'm following you, because this is still sight unseen. Now you have told me where we're going. So in a sense, it's like Abraham in the Bible. God told Abraham to go, leave the land, leave all of this stuff, pack up, and I need you to go to a foreign land. I'll let you know when you get there, okay? Like, he didn't even say, you're going to go here. He said, pack up and go. And when you go, then I will let you know where you're going to go. And so Abraham was obedient. He didn't think twice. He said, say less. Like, I'm packing up. Let's go, y'all. His wife, and he took all his stuff. He was wealthy. Everything. He just like, we're finna go this way, and God will let us know when we get there. So literally that was my story. Like, we're packing up, we're going this way, and God will let us know when we get there. So when we found out it was Georgia, sight unseen, I'm like, okay, God, like, where you're gonna have to open up the doors for us to go scope out the city and things like that. Like, the city, where are we going? And so my husband has family there in a particular city, and so we just didn't know when we were going to go visit. And so, okay, bet. So I started going to counseling. God sent people for me to start talking to guide me through this move, because he allowed me to share with them, like, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what we're doing, this is where I'm going. I don't want to mess it up. And he actually led me to people that had already made the move maybe 2 years before us, which is amazing, because I had a dream that we went with them, but I was delayed. And y'all, I didn't know much about dreams like I know now, but in that dream, we were going with them to Georgia. And this was before they moved to Georgia, but we were going with them to Georgia. And then I remember we got off, and I went in a bank, and I was trying to get money, and there was some kind of hold up. So that lets me know right now that I've grown spiritually, that was delay. And yeah, that was delay. And I didn't know how to pray against those things like I do now, like interpret dreams and things like that. But I knew that showing us going with them was a part of it. But we eventually ended up there, and they were the ones that guided us through this move, to make it through. So it was still divine. But I started to conversate with certain people, and it was really just them and another particular person who was all divine help and counseling. And still sight unseen, I'm like, God, I trust you. I'm still going to move forward. We're still going to do this. And while I'm encouraging my husband along the way too, trying to keep him, to have faith that we can do this, And so skip from Thanksgiving Day to Christmas Day, my husband talks to his family that lives there, and he hadn't talked to them in a while. And he got on the phone with them, and they were like, "Oh, when you gonna come back up here? We need you to do something for us," and blah blah blah. And so he was like, "Yeah, we know we've just been talking about moving there and things like that." And he was like, "Oh, really? Because I have a house here, and y'all could come check it out, and if y'all like it, y'all can live in it." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "What, Lord? What? This is a month later. Like, what?" So, okay, bet. So now it was like that was the reason to go now, to go look at the place, look out for where we were going to live. And I'm thinking like, okay, God, you actually have the house ready for us already? What? All right, so this is December. We're going from November to December. And it's like, okay. So now we know we're going to get there to go look at this house that could possibly be where we're going to live at. And so here comes January, and I'm still like, Lord, okay, you got to make a way for us to get there. Like, you know, we didn't have the extra money to make this trip, still sight unseen, trusting God. I'm like, God, you said go, I'm going to go, but you're going to let us know when we're going to go. And so January comes around, and y'all know this is like the time of stimulus. So this was 2020 leading into 2021, and this is the time of like all that money, stimulus, all this stuff. So they dropped a surprise stimulus on everybody in January of 2021, and that was the funds for us to be able to go to Georgia to rent a car, get a hotel room, go to Georgia. I'm like, okay, we're going. And so my husband took a day off, and we went for that weekend. We went to go look at the house. This is still sight unseen, still trusting God. Like, God, we're gonna go. We didn't even have plans to go look at any other place or any other city or anything like that. We just had our mindset on like, we're going to go look at this house, and that's it. And this is it. Like, I didn't think to say, okay, I'm going to go look in this city with this house. Y'all, I got kids, so but we went there, and then when we looked at the house, we were like, no, we knew we needed to do some work to it and we could make it ours, but literally the house was like gutted out and it needed a lot of work, and that wasn't in our budget to do. So it was an immediate no. And so then I felt disappointed almost. I felt like, God, you brought us here and this is not even the house. Like, what's up with that? So, and this was literally a one-day trip. Like, we drove straight into Georgia, went straight to that house to look at it, and it was a no. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then the next morning, we were going to leave. And so I woke up that morning and I was just like, okay, I'm going to just look at a few apartments around here. And I aimed for low income apartments, like apartments that go by income restrictions and things like that, like affordable housing. And that's just where my mind was at, because that's how we were living at the time. Like, just everything, I needed everything to be affordable. And I looked up 4 places, and I said, okay, we're gonna go look at these 4 places before we head back home, because I'm like, I'm not leaving here without looking at anything. And this is on a Sunday, so we can't go view apartments and things like that. And so we went and looked at 3 of the 4, I think. And the second one I looked at was very nice. We couldn't drive in because it was a gated apartment complex and things like that. But I was like, okay, we've scoped it out. Some of them were just like a no. And I'm like, okay, so we're on our way home, and I'm still kind of disappointed. I'm just like, Lord, like, what is going on? We got here and that wasn't even the house, and now what? So when we got back home, I was still doing my part, my research. My husband just going on about, his regular schedule, going to work. And so I looked at the apartments, I called and things like that, and got information, and I just felt led to like apply. I told my husband, I'm like, I'm going to apply for these apartments. I'm going to see what happened. And so I did. This is the following week. We went on a weekend, Sunday, and I think maybe 2 days later, I applied. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to apply by faith. And so I applied, and in like 24 hours, we were approved. And I'm like, what? We hadn't seen these apartments, don't know how it looks behind the gate, don't know how the apartments look inside. We just went by the pictures and just went through the process that way. Because I trusted God, like, God, I'm not gonna let this go this time. Like, I'm just gonna keep applying I'm going to apply. I'm going to keep moving. We're going to keep going. So this is January 2021. And so we applied, we got approved, and I told my husband, I'm like, we got approved for the apartment. What are we gonna do? And we just kept moving. We still didn't have the money. We still didn't, just moving by faith, literally, like moving by faith. So this is January. So they called us and like, you got approved. When are you looking to move and things like that? And I'm like, oh, okay. You know, what do you have for April? Maybe May-ish, because that's like, no, I said March. And I was saying April. I was like, either spring break or summer for my children, just to wait. I'm on my own timing now at this point. And they're like, okay, well, we can look at what we'll have available and things like that. So I'm like, okay, cool. So they had something for April, I think. And then they called me back and they were like, this is while sending all the paperwork and everything like that. They called me back like, okay, we don't have April, so we have to move ahead. We have something in, I think they said March. I was like, okay, cool. Spring break. That's cool. Like, they'll be out of school. We can make the move then. And so we went for that. And then they called back and they was like, oh, we don't have anything for March, February. And you'll have to take this one, or we're going to have to lease it to, you know, other people. We can't hold anything because we don't see anything further out than that. And now that you've been approved, we only can hold your application for this long and blah, blah, blah. And y'all, I'm like, I'm not applying for nowhere else. We got approved. This is where we're going. And so we ended up moving sooner than we wanted to. So it wasn't on our time, and it wasn't according to what we had in the bank. It was still sight unseen, even though we seen the apartments, but we didn't know how it looked and, you know, everything like that. We just went with it, and we ended up moving way earlier. So this is from November, finding out where we're gonna go, to February. And we actually went and got our keys. We got our keys on February, I think 10th. So we went from November to February. And that's just how fast God moved. And this is all because I trust him and obey him. And I'm like, Lord, we're going to go in these apartments. We don't know how it is. We don't know how the people are. We just know it's affordable living and all these things. And we went and we picked up our keys. God provided everything, which I'll talk about in another video. But sight unseen, will you trust God? Like, when God opens the doors for you, will you move when he says move? Like, will you see the signs and not move according to your own life, what you think life should look like, what you have in your bank account? Will you go like Abraham went when God told him to go, sight unseen? And trust that God will show you along the way. See, this is what happens when you be obedient. When God is telling you to move, he will show you. And for every door that he presents before you, you got the key to unlock it by being obedient and just saying, okay, this is a door, let me walk through it. And then when you walk through that one, this is another door, let me walk through it. And then when you walk through that one, this is another door. This all literally happened in less than 3 months for us. So when God is telling you to move, you have to be willing to move sight unseen. And I don't mean just the physical location, but the things that he needs you to do before then. Like, will you follow the leading of God as he tells you to move? And trust that he's not going to lead you in a bad place. Like, just know that God works everything out for your good. Because even in this apartment complex, when we finally got the keys to go see it and be able to go inside, we were like, wow, this is beautiful. The apartment was so nice. The complex was nice and clean, and we were just in a beautiful area, a perfect area. And honestly, if we didn't go in the area we were in, I mean, I don't know how things would have turned out, but I mean, everything was divine. From, you know, our neighbors, the building we were in our apartment complex, just wonderful neighbors. Like, everybody that we met, even up until the end of me moving out of that apartment complex, like, was supernatural moves. Like, we showed up for people right on time. People showed up for us right on time. There was people that moved into our building that was just right on time. Like, so, and I'll share more about that, but that's how you know when it's God. Because honestly, we were moving, but we didn't know what was going to happen after our move. We didn't know how things were going to look after our move. Like, we just knew that, okay, this is where we're supposed to be right now, and this is what we're going to do, and we're going to trust God. And I'll talk more about that, but this is why it's important for you to move sight unseen and be obedient and move by faith when God wants you to move. It's not about your plan, your way, having things look the way you want it to look when God is trying to do something in your life. That's not what it's always about. Yes, God gives us the desires of our heart, but when God has a plan for us, you have to trust him. So didn't know what state, I didn't know what city, and I didn't know where, like apartment, how it was going to look and where we were going, but I trusted God and he worked it all out step by step. So I just wanted to share that and encourage you to just continue to trust God. If you know he's moving you to somewhere else, another state, another job, another, I'm talking from state to state, like moving my family, but whatever the case may be, you trust him and do everything that he's telling you to do. Every opportunity presented before you, take it. Go walk through the doors, but also pray against counterfeits, because the enemy will try to see something that looks good and you'll be debating like, God, is this you? But you should have so much discernment and be able to trust God so much that, and lean into God and be in prayer, that you know when it's him. So that's my tea for today. That's my part 3 of my moving testimony as I unpack everything and just see what God did in all of this. And he's so amazing, because even as I talked out through that, there's so much more just in that part alone of like just living like the apartment complex we were living in, and the blessings and things that happened, and just how God began to work everything out even after our move. So it's such a blessing. So that's my tea for today. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know, like, share your testimony of how God moved you, or if you feel like he's moving you right now, what he's doing. Maybe you need some wisdom, some guidance, some prayer. Please reach out to me. Follow me on TikTok at Krystal_Clayton. Links in the bio, everything you need to know in the bio. And thank you for watching. Be back with a part 4.